This was a trucking company here before, and they used the shop to work on their trucks. And of course, it's never as cheap as you think it's going to be, right?
Never goes as planned.
When I talked to the sellers, they had already had a phase one done. At this point, I'm going to sell it. I'm going to lease it. I've got an education, and, even if I break even, I'll be good on it. Well, little did I know the education was just about to start, okay? They said, well, the problem is it didn't actually pass the phase one. I said, okay, what are you talking about? We're going to roll in the phase two inspection with this, so it's only going to cost you $14,000. If there's hydraulic oil in the ground, you're going to have to remediate all this, dig soil up, dig all this slab up until we get every bit of it. $50,000, $80,000, $90,000, right? That was a Saturday morning. I started 4 a.m. By Saturday night, at 11 o'clock at night, I got everything done, right? I had everything troweled out.
So you were there all day.
All day. That next Tuesday, these people come down. They actually decide, we don't want it. We actually decided we can't do anything with it.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Evernest Real Estate Investor Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Spencer Sutton, and today I'm joined with my co-host and really the star of the show today, Adam Hobson. Adam, welcome to the show. Are you ready to drive, take the wheel and drive this one?
I am. I'm definitely not the star of the show, but I'll do my best to explain it.
Well, the good news is there's no star of this show because we're just here talking. But you sent me a text yesterday and you were like, hey, would you be interested? Do you think the listeners would be interested in going over a couple of commercial deals that I've done in the past? And I was like, shoot, yeah, man. I never did any commercial deals per se. I mean, some people say multifamily is commercial, and it is to a certain extent. But what we're talking about, what we're going to talk about today is really industrial commercial space. So commercial could also be big office buildings and things like that. But this specifically, and what I'm looking at here on the screen is just like an industrial complex in North Birmingham that I would imagine is all over the United States. Like these types of things are all over the United States.
Yeah, yeah.
So tell me, so here you are, kind of the history of your history is 2018. You started wholesaling houses and you started flipping houses, and then you've done a lot of owner finance stuff. How did you get introduced to commercial, looking at commercial deals?
So there is, so I always wanted something because I do a lot of owner financing. I do a lot of residential stuff, but once you flip a house, that house is gone forever, right? You're never going to make money on the house again. So I wanted something to invest long-term in, right? Some long-term assets. I don't particularly want to have houses, I owner finance these houses. So yes, they're still assets as of now, but I have to assume they're going to be paid off at some point. And I hope that people do and they don't default. So I want something to take that money to roll it into something long-term that is bigger, like commercial, So I've done a couple of smaller commercial property. I mean, like $70,000, $75,000, $80,000 where I just immediately got it and I actually owner financed those out too. So,
okay. So you sold them and just,
I sold them owner financing. So may get those back one day. You never know. May not. But hopefully they pay it off and they can have an asset of their own. But got into this
real quick. Yeah. Why do people like commercial properties? Mainly, in my mind, and you tell me if this is correct. Mainly because, very different than a consumer. You usually have a business that's paying for this, and typically businesses may be a little bit more reliable. They'll sign a longer lease than your typical resident who's going to do a 12-month lease, but they lose their job and they're out or something like that. Is that the case? Is that the way you were seeing it?
As far as which
as far as if you were going to rent it out long term and hold on to it, so when all your owner finance deals eventually paid off and they own the properties, you still have commercial property bringing you income.
That's right. Yeah.
Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah. Just trying to kind of diversify. So for the next, if everything goes well, for the next 20 years, I'll have these owner finance properties that provide income. But like I said, the good thing about owner financing, you get that cash flow now versus, when I'm 65, I can't cash out a whole portfolio and sell them because they're already sold on, 20-year notes or whatever. Right. So, using this, you can put long-term tenants in. Really, when I heard the term triple net lease, that's kind of what got me hooked. So, I'd never heard of a triple net lease before, and I heard it was some podcast or YouTube channel, and they said, triple net lease where tenant pays insurance, they pay the taxes, and, you're basically just responsible for the foundation, the roof, They can build it out however they want to. They're
responsible
paint
for all of that stuff.
maintenance, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, that's just like owner financing, but I get to keep the asset, So that's kind of what appealed to me. So I started going down this rabbit hole, and a guy named Nolan in Birmingham, he started doing that. We went to coffee or did something at some networking thing, then got coffee, and he has started some collective where, he does this kind of full time. He used to be into the, he sells whole life insurance now, but he used to be into the residential space, I think in Indiana. And now he does commercial space around here, flex space specifically.
Here in Birmingham.
Here in Birmingham, yeah. And I mean, I think he goes, north, south. He goes within an hour, maybe 2 hours of Birmingham. But, I went to a little one-day event that he had, and he kind of broke down the criteria, and we've talked kind of, outside of that as well, having coffee. So I kind of knew what we were looking for, and like it just all made sense. Like these old buildings like this, you can't build them new for what I bought this building for, right? I mean, it would cost 3 or 4 times as much to build it brand new. So if you can find these buildings, do a little bit of work to them, people can have a good, operating warehouse, have a little bit of drop yard a mile from the interstate, all that kind of stuff to run their businesses out of. It's usually not that hard to get them leased up. It does take time. It's obviously takes longer than a tenant that's paying $850 a month for a residential property versus $5,900 a month for a commercial property like this.
So what attracted you to this type of deal? What the person that you took this course from or you learned from? What did he say? Here are the things you should be looking out for to know if it's a good deal or not.
Yeah.
Because I just remembered, like, I have been a part of a commercial deal in Lincoln, Alabama, which is up near Talladega.
I briefly remember that. Yeah.
We talked about it a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, we had this huge warehouse. At the end of the day, when 2008, 2009 happened, we were all like, listen, this thing, there's a Honda plant up there, and we were thinking, hey, there's going to be more businesses moving up there. So we had this big warehouse. Thankfully, my group, my partnership, we were just a small fraction of that ownership. So when we finally did have to settle up with a bank, it was relatively small, but there were other partners that had big chunks in it.
Yeah.
But it didn't work out for us, is my whole point.
Yeah.
So what did this person tell you? Like, hey, here are the signs that this is a good deal.
Well, so I one more thing beforehand. I looked at, you asked me about why I chose this kind of industrial flex space is what they call it. I had looked at apartments for like 6 months before this. I talked to apartment brokers, looked at the net sheet, and like every time if there was a 20 unit, a 50 unit apartment complex, I would look at these net sheets. Every time you got down to the bottom, it was showing like barely making any money or not making, basically breaking even. And this was from the broker, so I can only assume that the actual numbers may have been a little, a little worse.
They
than
were
that,
painting it in the best light possible.
That's right.
And you got to deal with the reality, and that's usually not the reality.
Yeah. So apartments, something was telling me, like I looked into apartment courses and all this kind of stuff, and I was just like, you know what, this seems like less work, more demand. It just seemed easier. So anyway, when I went to this guy's, one day event, he was, he got up there and he had his brokers up there saying, hey, this is what you could sell it for. And he had his leasing agent up there saying, yep, if you have a, building, you can rent it for this much per square foot. So I was just writing all this stuff down. By the time I left at the end of the day, it was like a, 7 or 8 hour thing. I found out, okay, I'm looking for 5,000 to 30,000 square foot warehouses within a mile from the interstate, maybe 2 miles, 18-foot ceiling height, roll-up doors, a little bit of office, not much, maybe less than 1,000 square foot of office where you could have a trucking company, a tow truck company, a dumpster rental place, anywhere where somebody needs to park a lot of equipment and they just need, maybe they have one office person that works there, one employee, 2 employees, maybe 3 or 4. Just enough to where they can operate that business out of it,
Mm-hmm.
So all that to say, I kind of honed in on that and said, okay, I'm going to start looking for these. So come to find out, if you want me to go into how I found this deal, I just kind of roll
So how
into
did you
it.
find this first deal? Because we're going to, just for you who are listening, we're going to walk through this deal and we're going to talk about it. We're going to be showing, if you're watching this on YouTube, we're going to be showing pictures of Adam's deal. Or maybe we're going to go through 2 deals or one deal.
Just this
deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to look at the pictures on this deal and then talk about it, but we'll explain everything if you're just listening on the podcast. So how did you find this deal?
All right, so and I've got the picture up on the screen here. It shows this was 1601 Vanderbilt Road in Birmingham. This is a mile from downtown Birmingham. We've got like Top Golf in this uptown area, so it's a very popular area, but it's right beside the interstate. So if it was a trucking company or anybody that needs, a freight company needs quick access to the interstate, it's very appealing for that reason, and they can park all these trailers. The picture I've got up here now is from a Google view from an app that I have. You can see this was a trucking company here before, and they use the shop to work on their trucks, but there's probably 15 or 20 trailers out there right now.
Yeah, a lot of trailers and then some other trucks off to the side.
But it was a two and a half acre lot, 7,000 square foot warehouse roughly. About 3/4 of it on the left side you can see is fenced in, so if they had any kind of more expensive equipment, stuff they wanted locked up that could be stolen, they could put it in the fenced in area.
But you were literally just driving and found this.
I was driving, so I was going to look at another house in North Birmingham, and I'd left this guy's course 2 days earlier. It was still fresh on my mind, so I was driving past this warehouse, and I looked over, and like we mentioned earlier, I probably never would have paid attention to this warehouse had I not just been to this course. So driving down the road, I look over, I see this warehouse, looks vacant, and there's a little 2x2 for sale by owner sign on the door. So I whipped around, pulled in there. I said, you know what, it's probably not going to come of anything. I'm just going to call the guy. So I called it. It was a tow company. They are like, yeah, we just put that sign up yesterday. It's crazy that you called us. They said, we've had 3 people yesterday call wanting to lease the property, but you're the first one that's called wanting to actually buy it. Didn't have it listed with a broker or anything like that. So talked to him, and I said, well, I'm interested. When can I meet you? He lived in Coleman. He said, okay, I'll come down there tomorrow, and I can meet you. So anyway.
Which for those who aren't familiar, obviously, with our city, Coleman's like an hour away.
That's right. Yeah, he lived about an hour north of Birmingham. So we set all that up. He came down, and I had no idea. He didn't have an asking price on it, nothing. So he came down, and we walked through. I'll show you the pictures in a few minutes, but it was in disrepair. The office had been flooded. The shop floor had never been cleaned, probably ever since anybody had owned it. Never been pressure washed. Had bulbs out. Basically perfect what I was looking for. I was looking for a fixer-upper.
Yeah, right. That's exactly what you look for in a house.
That's right.
Well, right? You're looking at a house. You're like, okay, this house is junked up or falling apart. Yeah, this would be great to add a lot of value to this property.
Yeah, how can I add some value to it? So anyway, this guy came down and we talked about it. And granted, now I'm just sitting here talking about, learning from this one guy. I'm only 2 days of knowledge here studying this. And
you're so green.
I know, right? I'm so green. I told the broker that was there, the leasing agent that was at the meetup or that 1 day course. When I got this, when I said I was going to meet this guy, I called that guy. I said, hey, remember yesterday or the day before when I was at this, I met you yesterday. Well, I've actually got this property I'm thinking about buying. Can you meet me down there? So I told him on the phone, because how real estate is kind of cutthroat. I just said point blank, I said, look, I'm going to trust you not to screw me over here. I said,
don't call this person and make the offer.
I said, I know I just went to Nolan's course, and I said, Nolan's a stand-up guy, but I said, also, I know you're in it to make money. So I said, I'm going to trust that you're going to come down here and help me with this and not say, hey, I've got this deal. Go outbid this guy, And he didn't. He came down there, and he was straight up with me. So long story short, the guy came down. We started talking about price, and I think they wanted $490,000 or something like that, and it was like 2 brothers that were in this together. Of course, they were feuding. They didn't want to talk to each other, so it was a whole mess. Walked through. I called the lady back. This was like in October of 23. I called the lady who was kind of it was his wife, the owner's wife. She was like a hard, fast moving, like won't take any crap off anybody, kind of negotiating kind of businesswoman. And I was talking to her, and she's like, yeah, they're not going to go for that. We got to have 490 or we're not going to sell it. I said, okay, well, I appreciate you showing me. We'd walked around the building, walked around the lot, and I said, well, something changes. Can you call me? She said, yeah. So this was October of 23, November of 24. November of 23, like the end of November, she calls me back and she said, hey, we really want to sell this property. Could you do 450 on it? And I said, I just don't think I can make the numbers work on it. I really need to be really conservative on this. And she said, okay, well, she said, let me talk to them and see, what they can do. I said, well, I can still pay 400. Just let me know, So no, actually, I'm sorry. I'd offered 370 on it because I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to get messed over. I'd offered 370,000. She calls at the end of November, said, well, can you do 450 on it? I said, no. December 15th, I think it was, of 23, she called and said, look, we can do 400,000 if you'll agree to 400,000. So I just really wanted to get into this, industrial space. So I said, okay, let's do it for 400,000. Mind you, I didn't have money lined up.
Yeah, you didn't have the 400,000.
I didn't have the
right?
400,000. No, I had 100,000 sitting in an account for. I knew I eventually wanted to get into this, and it was going to be for hard money payments, that kind of thing. So I said, you know what? Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'll sign the agreement. I signed it, and then I said, okay. Now it just got real. Now I got to find out. I got to find a crew to rehab this. I got to find the money first. So called one of our hard money lenders and walked him through it. Said, hey, these are my numbers. I think I can sell it for this, or rent it for this. I think I can get financing long term through a bank. And he agreed to do it. He was going to fund 370,000 of it, but he was like, I want you to have some clout in this deal,
He wants you to have some skin in the game.
Yeah. So I had to put 30,000 down, and then I was going to have to pay for the rehab and any other expenses with it, right?
So tell me real quick, let me interrupt you here. What is for your hard money lender, how much education did you have to do? Because I know this hard money lender, he's an expert in residential, right? And I think he probably has done some commercial.
He's done it all, yeah.
He's done it all, yeah. So you didn't really have to educate him too much, but you did need to walk him through the deal and say, hey, this is what I'm planning on doing with it.
Yeah, well, sometimes too, because we've talked about Trey, who's the hard money lender. We've talked about Brian before. The problem with them is they have too much faith in me sometimes, because sometimes I'll call Trey and I'll just say, hey, you interested in funding this deal? He's like, oh, yeah, I wouldn't for anybody else, but I'll do it for you because I know you'll make it work. And I'm like, oh, crap. Well, now I don't have a choice.
You don't really have confidence. He's not so confident about it.
Yeah, because I don't ever want to be that guy that has to give a property back or say, hey, I can't pay you. So I'm like, we'll go into all that stuff later, but I was like, I got to make this work. So I called him. He knows. I mean, he's done, storage units. He's built them from the ground up. He's built commercial property. He's got apartments. He's done a little bit of everything. So he knows the deal. So when I went over it with him, I told him everything, sat down, showed him pictures, detailed analysis of everything. He was like, yeah, I think you're right. This could probably work. So I said, okay. So went ahead and started the process of the deal. Anything you want to ask before I kind of break down the condition?
Let's keep going, yeah.
Okay, so I just want to show you kind of the condition first. We've got a video we're going to play for you. All right, so this is me walking through this commercial warehouse. This is 7,200 square feet. It's got 7 roll-up doors, 4 on one side, 3 on the other. You can see this office space it's showing is just deteriorated, right? So like you just got wood studs up here. You don't have any drywall. You've got, obviously it looks like some damage from something which ended up being a water leak. You've got bulbs out. You've got a dirty warehouse floor. It's just a warehouse that is just kind of run down and dark.
It looks like water's on the floor.
Water's on the floor. Yeah, there were some roof leaks. So we're walking through here showing kind of the offices here. There was about 3 or 4 different offices, and there was just all a mixed type of old flooring, old paneling, all this kind of stuff.
That old fake wood paneling.
Old fake wood paneling. Not the good pine stuff, the old fake wood stuff.
Right.
Also had been water damaged, also had outdated electrical, all this different stuff. You can see there's water in the bathroom where stuff had been leaking, a water leak we had. So this was just an office that was in disarray. So next part of this video, I'm walking outside showing you kind of the real reason I bought this lot. This was a 2.5 acre lot, close, 1 mile from the interstate, like I talked about earlier. And this is just panning around showing this big gravel lot. I did end up doing some work. I had a few dump truck loads of gravel brought in so I could fill in these spaces. And I had the tree line cut back about probably 20 foot all the way around so that it would maximize the space.
So it looked a lot bigger.
Yeah, and it was more functional.
Did it matter that the parking lot, like there was gravel, but then there was some asphalt kind of crumbled and all that? Did that even really matter? Or?
It didn't, but I covered a lot of that up with gravel.
Okay.
So yeah, I had 2 or 3 dump. This is showing the outside of the fenced in area too. There was 3/4 of an acre that was fenced in. This was actually the entrance to the office as well, where you could come in, because this was in a sketchier part of town. Any of these industrial buildings, most of the time we're in a little bit rougher areas because that's where you can find the most land for the cheapest and all that. So there was a little 3/4 of an acre that was fenced in so that you could park expensive equipment, whatever else you need to lock up in there. So that was kind of what it looked like before. It needed an office rehab. I think it was like 900 square feet of office, 3 or 4 different offices in there, a little conference room. There was no heating and air. There was no water heater. There was water damage because the previous owner had the water heater leak and it was sitting on top in the mezzanine storage area. It busted and kind of got everything, right? So here we are. I'm saying, okay, I'm going to buy this $400,000 property. I'm going to put in 30,000 of it. I'm going to put in the repairs, and then I'm hoping in 6 months when this hard money loan runs out that I can turn around and get long-term financing.
What was your all-in rehab budget?
So I had put, I believe 40,000 for the rehab. So it was going to be like, I said 15,000 in the video, but I think I'd quoted 20,000 for the office, and then we had, a couple of dump truck loads of gravel, and then we had fixed some stuff on the fence. Also, that fenced-in area, we put a dump truck load of gravel in there as well. I hired a guy with a bobcat to come out, spread all this stuff out. So I was hoping I could be. I mean, I had $100,000 to work with, so I said if I can be, if I can buy it for 400. After everything is done, if I can be into it for 490,000
with rehab payments,
and everything, if I can sell it for 590,000, by the time I pay the broker fees, all that kind of stuff, I would still net like 75 grand, right? But that was kind of my contingency plan. I really wanted to get all of my money back out of it. So I said, if I have $409,000 into it, if I can get $5,900 a month in rent payment, in theory, the building should appraise for $590,000 based on the rental income. If it appraised for $590,000, I can get 75 to 80% of the appraised price back out on long-term funding. So I get my $490 back, pay the $370,000 to the private lender, get my roughly 90 grand back that I had into it, and then almost break even, and then just kind of start renting it out and making. I mean, it was only going to be like $200 or $300 a month in cash flow, but I wasn't worried about that. I was wanting to have it for a long-term asset. I really was. As long as it paid for the debt, that's all I was worried about.
Right.
So, all that to say, that's kind of where I was at on that. So I secured the hard money. I had somebody come in and start rehabbing the office, and of course, it's never as cheap as you think it's going to be. Right.
Never goes as planned.
Yeah, I went one time I've ever doing anything. I've stayed in budget, and it was like $5. I stayed in budget. So, but anyway, I did it. So I'll say it was a flipping Forest Dale. But all this was a learning experience. So I had knew when I went to this one-day course, I knew about a phase 1 and a phase 2 environmental inspection. I'd never heard it until that day. Have you ever heard of those?
No. I mean, I've heard of them, but I had no clue what they are.
So a phase 1 environmental is when you buy a commercial property, if it's surrounded by gas stations, or in this case, it used to be a truck repair shop, anything environmentally, subject to environmental stuff like an old gas station where there's possible pumps in the ground, all this kind of stuff, storage tanks in the ground for used oil, you have to have, most of the time the banks are going to require a phase 1 inspection. They're typically $2,500 roughly. I'd kind of factor that in. This is basically like a computer analysis. So you'll pay somebody $2,500. They'll say, okay, is there a reason to get another level, or is it okay? Like, should we go to the phase 2, or can we pass it just off phase 1? So they get on there and they say, okay, well, there's no gas stations around this area. Everything should be good because, there's no environmental, there's not a laundromat up on a hill that's, blasting chemicals down into this yard. So that would kind of be what a phase 1 would be for $2,500. And
do they? So the banks won't finance it until you have that.
Most of the time, 90% of the time, until you have now, if it's like an office building where you're nowhere near any, if it's just a set of offices,
big a deal, right?
There's no need for it. So like the one I'm doing in Alabaster now, they're not going to require that because it's an office building. But if it's something like this, an industrial type building, they're going to require usually a phase 1 inspection. So phase 1, I'd already counted for that, but the reason I was not worried about that is when I talked to the sellers, they had already had a phase 1 done. Okay. So I said, and I showed this to my hard money lender, I said, look, here's the phase 1 they had. This is what they did to remediate everything. So they actually had a phase 1 done, like within that it was still within a year. They had a phase 1. I'd asked the banker, I said, hey, could I still use this phase 1 that they had? Well, if it's less than a year old, sure, you can use it. So they had a phase 1. They failed the phase 1 because they had big storage tanks in the ground. This was a truck repair company. They would put all their used oil into a storage tank that was in the ground. Pretty common.
Kind of like an express oil change.
Yeah, like an express oil change. Anywhere to house oil, they would have the oil pumped out, twice a year, something like that. So it had failed the phase 1. They showed me all the receipts from this environmental company. They paid like $20,000 to have these tanks taken out of the ground, and then they had it all filled back in, gravel put over it, all that kind of stuff. So in my mind, I'm looking at it and I said, okay, well, they've already had the phase 1 done. They did this to pass it. Everything should be good. Well, Come to find out, I don't know if the seller didn't tell me everything or whatever it was. During this process, when we were getting this phase 1 inspection done, they came back and said, I sent them all the paperwork showing where a phase 1 had been done. They said, well, the problem is it didn't actually pass the phase 1. I said, okay, what are you talking about? They said, well, they had a phase 1 inspection done. They pulled the tanks out. It fixed that one problem that they had with the tank in the ground, but you still got 2.5 acres over here that's never had any kind of, this was for this one isolated area that they found. So like when they were doing the phase 1, they said, okay, well, we have to fix this before we do anything else. So it never actually passed. So here I am thinking I'm not going to have to pay this, another $2,500 to get it done. And then they said, yeah, you actually have to have a phase 1. This is all why I'm rehabbing it. I'm talking to potential tenants, telling them, hey, I'm going to be rehabbing this property. This is going to be up for lease. Go ahead and look at it, see if you'd be interested. Because I'm trying to get everything going.
Yeah, you're trying to get it. You want to get a lease signed so that when it's ready, you're collecting.
Yeah, because I've got to take that lease and I've got to take it to the bank.
Yeah, sure.
And say, look, luckily there was no seasoning period, so like I didn't have to have it leased up for like 6 months before they would even consider it. They just said, hey, if you get a tenant in place, for X number of dollars, we can probably do the loan based off that. So playing this game with the bank, had a phase 1 done, and actually what it was, let me back up. I'd just gotten done rehabbing the inside of this property, and we had a potential buyer. I was not going to do a phase 1. That's what it was. I was not going to do a phase 1 until I had a tenant in place or I had somebody that was going to buy it, because I was still on the fence. This was 2 or 3 months in. I was a nervous wreck. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to sell this or lease it. Whichever one comes first is what I'm going to do. So I had it for sale.
You just knew that hard money was coming due in 6 months, or else you're going to be charged more points.
Yep.
And it's just going to get a lot more expensive.
Yep. So also, like during this time period, I was still flipping houses. I was still buying and selling real estate, but me and my wife had found a house that we had always loved on this one street in Helena, which is 30 minutes from, downtown Birmingham, and we had to move on it fast. So we're in the middle of buying this house. I had money tied up there, money tied up in this commercial. I was just way out of my comfort zone. So I said, look, I don't care what it is. At this point, I'm going to sell it. I'm going to lease it. I've got an education, and, even if I break even, I'll be good on it. Well, little did I know the education was just about to start. Okay. So,
and this is a really interesting point. There's nothing like pressure to help you get creative, and push things across the finish line.
That's right. Yeah. So I was getting, I had stuff on. I had Facebook ads. I had a leasing agent putting stuff out there. I had all kinds of stuff. Anything I could do to get this thing sold or leased up is what I was going to do. Because I said, if I can get it under contract by January is when I officially bought the building, January 1. If, I had until January, March, April, May, June. Yeah. So I had till the end of July roughly to get this property sold or leased up and get a bank. So I said, by June 1st, if I can find a buyer or if I can find somebody to lease it, then that'll give me a month to either get the loan approved or to sell the property. So here we are, phase 1. We have it rehabbed. This is like March. We have it rehabbed, and the potential buyer. I talked to my leasing agent, and the lady was actually helping me sell it too. And I said, okay, should I go and get this phase 1 done? She said, let's wait until we find a buyer, because sometimes if they get financing, the bank wants their own phase 1 done, their own environmental. So I said, okay. So we waited. March, we had somebody that was interested. They said, have you done a phase 1? No. They said, okay, we want you to go ahead and pay for the phase 1. Go ahead and get it done. And then, in the meantime, we're going to start this process. Got the phase 1 done. And they came back and said, the company that did it, it's Bullock Environmental, I think. They said, well, actually, based on the property history, we were the ones that came out and took the tanks out of the ground for this lady. I called a random company. I didn't know that it was the same company that she used. They said, we took the tanks out of the ground for this lady 6 months ago, and it did not pass, so we're not going to be able to pass this phase 1. This was new information to me. I didn't know anything about it. So all I knew was that I heard a phase 2 cost about $15,000 in this 1-day course. So here we are. Phase 1 was done, and I still had to pay for that, right? So I had to pay that $2,500, and they said, well, you've actually got to have a phase 2 as well. So if you want me to stop there, if you get any other questions before, I know there's a lot of information.
I'm on the edge of my seat now, because I can see your profit margins are starting to dwindle with all these inspections.
It is, yeah. And I know people are thinking, well, Adam, you're an idiot. Why would you You didn't know anything about this. Why would you risk this money? Why would you do it? Like,
Because he's an entrepreneur.
well, I don't know. I was questioning every decision I ever made during this time period. But all I knew is this was a 2.5 acre lot, a mile from downtown. I knew that I could just get this. I just felt it. I had a feeling that I could rent this out. There were so many people, so many trucking companies, so many all this stuff, and like there was like on the same road. There's like an acre here, a half acre there. There's nothing that was 2.5 acres that was this big that somebody could rent out. So I just knew I had a feeling I could get it done. So we're 3 months in. I'm going through all this stuff, but I'll give you kind of a silver lining for this. So my hard money payment was $3,500 a month. Okay, no matter what I did, how much money I put into, I had to make that $3,500 a month payment plus insurance, which on this was like $400 a month roughly, and that's not including the flood insurance. That was just standard property insurance. So I'm into it. Let's call it $4,000 a month. February 1, I'd put it up for lease. I put a for lease sign while I was rehabbing it. I had a random call from a guy. Granted, I'm stressing out. I'm worried about all this stuff. Guy called me, said, "Hey, we are down here from Georgia on a job for the next 4 or 5 months. We want to rent your lot for, until we're done with this. Are you leasing this out?" And I said, "No, actually, this is perfect. I'm going to lease it eventually, but right now it's just vacant, so that'd be great. I'm willing to rent it to you, right?" In my head, I was going to tell him $2,500, right? Because I'm just like, hey, he's wanting to park some equipment. It'll help me out. So I said, well, how much were you thinking to rent it for every month? He said, we'll pay you $3,500 a month.
You're like, I'm glad I didn't speak first.
Yep, done. That's one thing. Like I would have knocked myself out of $1,000, And he said, we just need somewhere to park 4 or 5 months. So I said, okay, well, that'll cover my hard money payment right there. So now it goes from, $4,000. Now I'm only owing $500 a month. So turns out that same time period, the guy down the street that owned the pallet company said, hey, I've got these 5 trailers. The previous owner used to let me park here. Could I park my 5 trailers there for $100 a month? So I said, okay, well, that equals almost exactly what my hard money payment and insurance payment is. I was like, this just kind of solidifies I'm doing the right thing. Like, it may have been stupid, but I'm like, what are the chances of these people calling me out of the blue? I owe $4,000 a month. They're going to pay me $4,000 a month. I'm going to break even. I was like, I think somebody's watching out for me. I think I'm supposed to.
So they were going to pay you
this.
$100 a month or $500?
$100 per trailer for 5 trailers.
Okay, gotcha,
Yep.
gotcha.
So that was $500. So it equaled exactly what my insurance and my mortgage payment, my hard money payment was. So that kind of alleviated some of the stress. But we get into, this is like, so I had, payments for like 4 months. Everything was going good. I had it rehabbed. We had a potential person that was going to lease it, and they wanted us to get these environmental reports. Phase 1, I'd paid $2,500. It failed the phase 1, so they said we have to do a phase 2 inspection. I said, well, what does that entail? They said, well, we have to come out and take soil samples of all of this area that was not done before from the previous owner. So I said, okay. So they came out, they took soil samples, and I said, well, what's kind of that process? They said, well, all of this in North Birmingham was these old, I guess it was like Coke plants and different stuff. They said, they used to use different chemicals, and they pushed all these old houses down and buried it. They said there's just all kinds of environmental issues on this side of town. I didn't realize that when I got into this. There you go. That's a learning experience. So he said, we're going to take some soil samples from like 10 or 15 different areas. We're going to drill down, get those soil samples done. If we don't find anything in the soil samples, we can go ahead and pass it, and it'll be cheaper than a full phase 2, right? So it's going to be like $4 or $5 grand. Okay, that sounds great. Let's do it. So they do that. I met the guy out there after he got the soil samples and everything, and we were talking. He never stepped foot inside the building because all the soil samples were outside of the building, right? So we were talking, and he said, "Can I use your restroom?" or something like that. We walk inside, and he said,
"You should have said no."
I know, right? I don't know what I was thinking. I was like, the inside's good. He didn't have to worry about that, right? So he comes inside, and he starts walking, and he says, "What are those?" And I said, what do you mean? There was these big, like probably 10-inch in diameter caps, maybe 12-inch, 3 of them along inside this warehouse, inside the shop. So he went over there and looked at him. He said, those look like old hydraulic lifts. And I said, yeah, well, this used to be a taxi company in the 70s. I know that. And he said, let me look at this. And he was like, I need a screwdriver. I got to pop this open. He pops the cap off of, like the cover off of one of these things, because somebody had obviously bolted it into the concrete where it was just sealed up. There was nothing, non-functional anymore. Probably for 20, 30 years it had been like this. And he pops the cap off and he takes a stick or piece of straw or something, sticks down in there and pulls hydraulic oil out of it. And instantly he goes, this isn't good. And I'm just sitting there thinking.
And you went, cha-ching.
Yeah. We went 5 minutes ago from getting soil samples outside the building to now he's telling me, this is not good. And I said, that's not good. What does that mean? He said, well, in the 70s, they used this hydraulic oil that was very toxic, and I don't remember the name of it. He said, it was either 70 to 71 they swapped over. So he's like, it's a coin toss of whether it's going to be this terrible toxic hydraulic oil or if it's going to be the safe kind, let's put it that way. And I said, okay, so what do you have to do? He's like, let me go back, talk to my boss. There's a chance we can just cap these off, hope that it doesn't get into the soil, that it's going to stay contained in that cylinder, right? Which is what they had done before for years. I said, what's at the top? Because it hasn't leaked out because it's still in there. So he said, let me go talk to my boss. He comes back and says, well, you know what? We're actually going to recommend that you take these out, because he said we can't pass it until you take these cylinders out of the ground. For everybody that can't see, now this is the time period. This is like April, beginning of May, and we already have the rehab done. I have the lot looking nice with new gravel. Everything is out. We're trying to lease it up. We're getting this phase 1 done for a potential lessee so that we can refinance it. And the picture on the screen now is 3 massive holes about 10 foot deep inside.
In your concrete. Inside
the concrete, yeah. So for anybody that is listening that you can't see it, like I said, all these bulldozers, these massive holes, and probably, I don't know, my nerves are somewhere in the mix of this concrete because I was a nervous wreck, right? He said, we've got to pull these cylinders from the 70s completely out of the ground. I said, okay, what's that going to cost? He said, well, we're going to roll in the phase 2 inspection with this, so it's only going to cost you $14,000. I said, okay. So I said $14,000, and we're going to be completely, it will be completely done. It'll be fixed. He said, well, $14,000, when we pull out the cylinders, if nothing is leaked out, it'll only be $14,000. I said, so what if, worst case scenario, you pull it out and these things have leaked over the years and it's into the soil? He said, you're going to have major, major problems. So he's saying, if there's hydraulic oil in the ground, you're going to have to remediate all this, dig soil up, dig all this slab up until we get every bit of it. You're talking about $50,000, $80,000, $90,000, right? So I'm like, I'm done. I'm finished. There's no way I'm ever.
History. I'll never financially recover from this. Kind of like the Lion King.
No way I'm ever coming back.
Tiger
from this.
King, whatever it is.
Luckily, this guy was willing to work with us. He said, okay, look, I don't think there's going to be any issues. But I said, what if you pull this out and there's seepage or anything? He was like, I'm not really worried about that. He was like, unless it's a massive, he was basically in one way or another telling me, hey,
it needs to be very obvious.
He said, it's going to be okay. He said, unless we find something major, it's going to be okay. So he was telling me without telling me that we're not going to go in there and just try to ream you. We're not trying to just destroy you. So anyway, they pull these cylinders out. There was a little bit of seepage here and there. When they were digging, he said, we have to take soil samples from underneath to make sure this stuff's not leaked out. So when they pulled out chunks of this stuff, he made sure to get, very dry soil, nothing that had been affected by the seepage out of this thing. So I know all this stuff is very boring. I'm just trying to give you the details of kind of every aspect of it, right? Because it was not boring for me, because as you can see from these bulldozers, Jacob, if you want to pan to the next.
You couldn't even sleep at night.
Oh, no. I mean, it was terrible, yeah.
You were not sleeping.
There's a couple of other pictures right there beside that other one of the holes in there. So go to that fourth one from the top, very top row. That one, nope, right there. So here's kind of after they took the cylinders out, this is them kind of packing it back in. They're filling it with 3 or 4 foot of gravel. So I had to pay for the gravel, had to pay for them to come out and do this. We had to pay for the soil testing. All of it was $14,000. So after they got all this done, I waited to fill it in until I got the soil samples back. 2 days later, he sent back, he said, hey, here's the invoice for $14,000. You're good on the soil samples, so you can fill the holes back in, right? So they filled it back in, and Jacob, there's one more video on there. One more picture, I'm sorry, that third one right there. So this is what it looks like. For people who can't see, everything is cleaned up. The bulldozers are gone. All the rock is gone. It's got probably 3 or 4 foot of compressed gravel that they filled into the hole. They did that for me. They packed it in. But we've got about 6 to 8 inches of concrete missing, probably a 4x4 hole, a couple of 4x4 holes, and a 3x3 hole.
Yeah.
Basically, this open in the...
Essentially, this is not the way you were selling it, right? So when you sold it to somebody... it has to be all level.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I'm sure that people would understand, like, even if I said, hey, I'm going to get this filled in, I'm going to get it fixed, but right now it's not usable, right? So I had a nationwide company coming down to look at leasing this thing. This was a Friday when they finished up, right? So, like, this is a Friday. They gave me the okay. This picture here shows it on one day in May on a Friday. Well, on that following Monday or Tuesday is when this nationwide company was going to come down. They were pretty sure they wanted it, but I didn't want them to see it like this, right? So I scrambled. I tried to call, concrete guys, trying to let them, say, hey, can you come up here? Is there any way you can come today, fill this thing in? I can pay you extra, whatever. They said, no, we don't have anybody for like 2 weeks. So here I am on a Friday. There's nobody that can come and fill these holes in. I'm trying to get it done by Monday. So I decided, I said, look, I've got to do this myself. Like, I'd done concrete work before at my own house and all that kind of stuff, laid slabs, but by myself, this was a massive undertaking, right? At this point, I was one month away from getting hard money loan being up, having to get another 3 points on $370,000. And I was so done with this thing. I was just ready to get it done. I'd learned all this stuff, learned about phase 1, about phase 2, gotten a knockdown education in commercial flex-based real estate. Yeah. I was, thinking about going by this guy's house. I took his course and just like throwing rocks at it, breaking windows. I just wanted to do whatever just because I was so, it wasn't that bad, but you get what I'm saying. I was stressed out about it. So, Jacob, there's a video of, that one right there. So if you look at this, I decided that I've got to do this myself. So on a Friday, I called the concrete company. I said, hey, can I get however many, I don't remember how many yards of concrete it was. Can I get a few yards of concrete tomorrow? I'll be ready by 11:30. It's okay. Yeah, we close at 12, so you got to have it done by 11:30. So I got there at like 4 a.m, put rebar. This video that I'm showing here is me putting rebar. Like I'm in the warehouse by myself, drilling out these holes so I can tie this rebar into the slab. Now, I could have just filled the holes in, but I didn't feel right about doing it that way. So I did it the right way. I put rebar in. I tied it into the existing slab so that the first time somebody pulled over it wouldn't just crack and separate and all that stuff. So this video shows me putting rebar in, getting ready for the concrete truck that's about to show up. I get ready. I fill in these holes. I've got it tamped down, got it wet for the concrete. Concrete guy shows up and he backs in, pours it into the holes. Well, now I've got to trowel it out. I've got to tamp it down, all this kind of stuff. So long story short, the video is showing these holes. It's showing me filling it in. By Saturday night, that was a Saturday morning. I started like 4 a.m. By Saturday night, at like 11 o'clock at night, I got everything done, right? I had everything troweled out.
So you were there all day.
All day. Yeah, I told my wife I won't be home tonight. I don't know what time I'll be there. Don't wait up on me. So I'd packed the lunch. I'd packed dinner, had all the snacks in my truck. I said, I got to get this done. So the video right now that's playing is showing me almost the finished result. Like I've got it troweled down, but like it's not smooth yet. I don't have it pressure washed, which that was another thing too. I had to have it pressure washed and cleaned up for these people to come look at it. So I'd already had the shop floor pressure washed before because I didn't expect to be tearing up the shop floor.
Right.
So anyway, all this last part of the video shows what it looks like after. I think I personally did a very good job considering what I was working with. It was all smooth. This is before I pressure washed it. So once I pressure washed it, it kind of matched a little bit better, But that really wasn't the point.
That doesn't even really matter.
No, somebody's going to use this for a trucking company. I mean, they're liable to come in there and redo it all themselves. They have the money to come in there and redo the slab if they wanted. I didn't care about that. I just don't want there to be holes in the ground. So fast forward to that next Tuesday, these people come down. They actually decide, we don't want it. We actually decided we can't do anything with it. So I'm like sitting here stuck. So we get a call on like Wednesday from a person that we'd never heard from before, another agent where we'd had it listed on Crexy and LoopNet, said, hey, my customer's been looking for something like this. He's got a lot of equipment. He wants to give you an all cash offer. Can we come look at it today? Yep, come look at it. They come down and look at it. Had it listed for $599,000, I believe is what it was. So $599,000. They came down and they offered they offered like $520,000 on it, and I was like, at $520,000, I will essentially, after I pay the broker fees and everything, I will essentially make like 10 or 15 grand on it, right? So was it 500? Yeah, 500. I was like, I'll make 15 or 20. I was like, I'm happy with that, but I was like, I need to see if they'll do more. So I told, my agent, I said, look, see if they'll do 560. We ended up settling on 545,000 for this property. So 545,000, that would make me, I would essentially net $50,000. But this was 6 months of work, 6 months. This is me down there every other day managing people. This was going through phase 1 through phase 2. At this point, I said, look, if I can get an education in this real estate, industrial real estate, and still make some money, I'll be happy with it.
You got paid. You got paid for an education.
That's good. Yeah. At least I got paid. I was willing to break even on it, but I said, you know what? I'm this far into it. If I counter offer, what are they going to say? No. I was like, I'll just go back to the original offer.
Yeah, you'll take the original offer.
I'll take the original offer. So did that. We had it was down to the wire, and I told my hard money lender, I said, look, if this goes over a couple weeks, can you extend me a couple weeks to this closing? He's like, yeah, as long as you have a contract, that's no problem. So all that to be said, it ended up working out, but had I not had these people renting out this lot for 4 months, 5 months, that would have been another 20 grand right there. So I would have made, instead of making 50, and that's not factoring in my time for 6 months of time. People look at it and say, well, 50 grand, that's a ton of money. It is a lot of money.
But it's 6 months of work. It's 6 months of you being down there. So if you back out all the hours you spent on this deal.
Missing potential deals, other deals,
what is the real hourly cost?
That's right. So anyway, I still consider it kind of breaking even. Yes, I made money on it. Yes, it was good, but I got rid of it, right? So but now I know, hey, another thing with this property, it was in a flood zone, but I didn't account for how much the flood insurance is going to be, right? Now, if you sell it as a cash offer, you don't have to worry about flood insurance. If you don't have a loan on it, you don't have to worry about the flood issue. And I'd actually called and tried to get it taken out of a flood zone because it was barely in the flood zone. It had been built up over years, and they had not come back and checked it. So it was a flood zone from 30 years ago when it was really low lying. Right. So I probably could have looked into that and gotten it taken out, but it would have taken time. So all that to say, I ended up getting out of it. I made money, but it was a long process. But Jacob, if you want to go to, it should say, let's see, we'll start off with picture number 3 right there, and just kind of go 3, 4, 5. So this is showing what it looked like after we got kind of the hallway done. I just want to show some after pictures, show you what it looked like. So, Jake, if you want to back out of there, you can kind of see, you can probably tell which ones are the after pictures.
Yep.
So here's another one of the bathroom. You saw the walkthrough video before. This one looks obviously better. And that's not fancy. It's just, but they didn't have to be, right?
That's good.
This is just going to be for a secretary to come in or anybody to come in, people to wash. There was a shower in another room that I actually didn't show, but it was for the mechanics and everything. They just needed somewhere clean to run their business out of. Mm-hmm. So this is the before and after the building. So really all we did on the outside was we repainted it, made everything match. You can see some of the gravel we put out front where it looks a little bit nicer. So really we just kind of spruced it up. It had a good metal roof on it. We repainted everything, just kind of gave it a little bit more curb appeal. But there again, it's an industrial building. People aren't trying to make it you're not trying to make this a Von Maur or a department store that looks nice. People just need it for functionality. So, but anyway, you get the gist of it. Just kind of wanted to show the before and after. I ended up spending $20 grand on the 20 grand on the rehab. That's actually my favorite picture right there, even though it looks, it's nothing to look at, but if you look at that top picture, they had flooded from up top, they had flooded this whole office area. There was no drywall. There was no, everything was just a mess. The lights were out, the bulbs were blown. And we're not talking about I totally underestimated industrial lighting, right? I'm okay, well, worst comes to worst, I'll go rent a lift and I'll change these bulbs myself. Well, the bulbs are $350 a piece. And then one of them needed a ballast and it's $500 for a ballast. I'm like, Man, I'm thinking bulbs from Home Depot. I'm not thinking industrial bulbs that you
I
have
can
to
take some
order.
bulbs out of my house.
That's
and
right.
Go down there.
So I'm like, whatever I got to do to get this thing done. So anyway, replacing lights, had to do a little bit of electrical stuff. I did not pull permits just because obvious reasons. I didn't want to have to rewire the whole thing. So luckily they kept the power on. We got it changed over in our name, so we wouldn't have to have an inspection. But this thing had like 3-phase power because they had welders and everything else. So that was another bonus too. Somebody that has a fab shop, they already had all this huge electrical done.
Right.
So, they had this 3-phase power that they could hook these welders up to or whatever. But anyway, I didn't do anything to the floor, but you can see the office space looks a lot nicer. Just, a lot of curb appeal, as far as just way better, obviously, than the top picture there.
It looks a lot better.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, what are your, like if you were talking to a group of real estate investors who are thinking about commercial, give me your top 3 lessons learned.
Okay, so I will, because actually I'm under contract for another one, not as big as this one and not as expensive. I'm under contract right now with a 2,500 square foot warehouse it's coming with an extra lot right beside it. And man, when I went in there, they would have thought I've been doing this for years. I was like, dude, I've already got an education in this. I was like, is this in a flood zone? They were like, I don't know. I was like, hold on a second, let me check. I'll get on my phone and check. It's not a flood zone. That's point A, right?
Where's your phase 1 and phase 2 environmental?
That's right. I said, if y'all had a phase 1, phase 1 environmental done, they were like, this was an agent. I think there was a residential agent that was doing this for somebody else. So she was not commercial. She was like, phase 1, what is that again? So I was like telling her what a phase 1 is. And like, we went outside and we looked around to say, hey, is there any gas stations around here? Is there a laundromat? So like I was looking around, didn't see any kind of issues with that. But I said, okay, well, I think if I get a phase 1, I'll be okay on this. So I would say your environmental reports are number 1. That's going to be the biggest thing. If you're buying one of these flex space that is 5,000 to 30,000 square foot warehouse, is it right beside a gas station? Did it used to be a gas station? Were there ever pumps in the ground? Is there a laundromat nearby? Are the surrounding buildings, like if you've got industrial truck shops all around it and you're right in the middle, even if yours is not, chances are you're going to have to get a phase 2 because phase 1 and 2, they're going to have to do soil samples. Anytime they do soil samples, that's the phase 2. It's going to get expensive. So just account for that. Flood zone's a big one because flood insurance, even on a house, flood insurance is expensive. This was like $200 extra a month for flood insurance that I didn't account for because I just said, well, even though I knew it didn't flood, I talked to the previous owners. I'd driven by this.
That doesn't matter if it's in the flood zone.
If it's in a flood zone, you got to pay for it.
Insurance.
Even if it never floods, if it's in that zone, in that colored part of the map, you got to pay for it. So that adds money to your loan. Could be hard to get and refinance out if it's in a flood zone. Some banks, even if you get flood insurance, they may not want to do it. So I would just say, make sure that it is as any deal. Make sure there's enough meat on the bone to make it worth it. Right. Luckily, I bought this one cheap enough.
I was about to say plus some, because of unforeseen issues you're always going to have.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I don't know if this was dumb or not. It probably was. The leasing agent that I talked to, I told you I trusted this leasing agent. I basically told him, hey, don't screw me over, dude, because I'm going to put your name out there to everybody if you do, because I didn't know who to trust, and I hate to tell him, but we know all the people that mess people over, but you never hear about the people that do a really good job most of the time.
That's right.
So I told this guy, I was like, look, you can come out here and look at this. If I get it, I'll let you try to help me lease it up. And so he came out and looked at it. And when we left, I said, hey, I think 370 would be a good number on this. What do you think? He was like, yeah, I don't think so. He's like, I think you need to get it for 300. I was like, really? I was like, you think I got to get it for that cheap? I was like, they'll never go for that. He was like, well, let me go back and talk to my, head broker or whatever. So we went back and talked to him. He called me back. He's like, yeah, dude, unless you can get this for like 320,000, I don't think it's going to work. Now, I'd offered 370 on this while we were that day while we were standing there. They told me they couldn't do it. They wanted 490. I knew 490 was not going to work, but all that to say, I should have probably taken that guy's advice because maybe I got lucky and found the one buyer that needed it. Maybe I didn't, but he does it all the time. So I would say if your first time you're getting into it, the third thing would be listen to a professional, like anybody that leases this out, that brokers it out. Because I think in my head, I was making it too good to be true. I was thinking, I could definitely find somebody to rent it for $5,900 a month. I had no real stuff to back that up other than the stuff I had looked at online that was renting out, So I would say check your environmentals, make sure that, you're good. check to make sure that it's a rentable space, that it's actually desirable for tenants, and it's in a good location close to the interstate, and you're getting it cheap enough. I took a risk. It ended up working out, and I got an education on it. But I could have been sitting here today saying, yeah, I lost $100,000 on this deal.
Yeah, especially if they'd have like found something in the soil inside the warehouse.
Yeah,
they'd have been like, "Hey, you got to demo the whole thing.
Yeah,
it cost $100,000."
A lot of things had to happen.
A lot of things could have gone wrong, but they didn't.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of things had to fall into place. Everything from not trusting, telling the guy, "Hey, I'm going to pay more for this property, even though you're the professional," to following up with this lady for 4 or 5 months, paying a little bit too much for it, going through all the phase 1, going through the phase 2, but then also finding somebody out of the blue that came out of nowhere to rent it for $3,500 a month, and then digging up everything and then getting it sold. So anyway, it was an emotional roller coaster. Yes, I walked away with $50,000, but the main thing was the education.
Yeah, I was about to say the education gave you a lot of confidence, so that you better know what you're looking for in the next one. You're going to be a lot more informed. The questions to ask. I mean, these are the things that are really, really helpful.
And I'll tell you, one of the biggest things I took away from this, that building I mentioned a minute ago that I have under contract right now, I have this building under contract for $170,000. It's a 2,500 square foot warehouse with a little bit of drop yard. It's in good condition. Like the outside's in good condition. I don't have to do anything to the office. It's already got HVAC in it. They've painted. Like it's fully functional now for somebody. And I mean, 25, 30 seconds to the interstate. Like it's super close to the interstate. But the reason I got this smaller one is, when I first went to this one day thing, they were saying 5,000 to 30,000 square foot. I guess that's ideal. But when I was trying to lease this up, I had a big for lease sign on this very first building we're talking about now. I had a for lease sign, and I'd posted on Facebook. I had probably, no lie, 20 people reach out to me asking, hey, do you have anything smaller? I've got a glass company. I've got a repair shop. I've got a HVAC company. I don't need this much space, because they said, how much do you want for this space? I said, well, it's almost $6,000 a month. They said, I need something for like $2,500 a month that's smaller that I can just run my business out of. So
you were like, I know there's a demand out there.
I know there's demand for it. Yeah. So I mean, literally 20 or 30 people all reaching out, and I'm like, I know that not that much has changed in a year. There's probably always going to be people that need this smaller space. This bigger space is going to be more for somebody like a nationwide company, a freight company, something like that. This I could rent to a small business owner.
The crazy thing is, if you're listening to this, there are businesses that need all kinds of warehouse space. I've got a friend who started a toy company. It's selling used toys, like vintage toys, out of his garage, and now he's got like this massive warehouse space.
Yeah.
And it's like there's always something going. As strange as that business is, selling vintage toys, he needed warehouse space.
Yeah.
Because he needed a little office.
Yeah.
So that's flex space that you're talking about.
Dude, I'll tell you, there was one guy that called me, and he said, hey, how much you want for this per month? And I was like, we're asking $5,900 per month. He was like, can I come inside and look? He was like, how smooth is the concrete? I was like, not that smooth anymore, because I just had to dig up these things. But anyway, he was like, well, I want to make it into an indoor basketball court. I was like, what are you talking about? Indoor He was like, yeah, we want to do this. Like, it was some business he was wanting to start where,
yeah, he was going to like coaching or whatever.
Something's, yeah, or like charging people to come play. I don't know what it was, but I was like, dude, I don't care what you do with it. But, anyway. So anyway, it was just kind of weird, all the different things that people were going to do with this, There was a couple other odd ones too. There was one lady, like you were talking about, they had a pipe supply company in Bessemer. They just needed somewhere to store a bunch of materials. But see, they didn't need the 2.5 acre lot,
Right,
So
that's right.
Anyway, I went over in my head. I was like, well, do I survey this off and do I keep the 1.5 acres and I can just fence it in, and, the 2 acres, fence it in and just sell the warehouse separate? I was just going over any scenario I could find. But the two things, the one was, okay, now if I can find a smaller warehouse space, there's more of a demand for it, because, not everybody has to be a nationwide company to rent it out. And 2, gravel lots. So since this time, I bought a little small gravel lot, and I'm going to have it fenced in, and I'm going to charge, hopefully $1,000 a month just to park trucks or, equipment there. But if I could find a big 1.5 acre lot, if you get $2,500 a month for a fenced in lot, that's the least amount of maintenance ever.
The least. You don't have to do anything.
That's right. So that's kind of 2 things I learned from that, because not only, and I forgot to mention this, one last thing I'll tell you, not only did I rent out to the one company for $3,500 a month, the one guy down the street with a pallet company for $500 a month, I also signed up for this. It's essentially Airbnb for truck drivers. So I think it was called Truck Parking Club. That's what it was. It's an app on your phone. These people reached out to me. I don't know how they got my number. They said, hey, would you be interested in this? I said, I've never heard of it. They said, for every 9 trucks on the road, there's 1 parking spot available. So they said, there's a need for parking all over. You sign up for this app, we take like 10 or 15%, maybe it's even 20%, and whatever they charge per night, whatever we get per night for the booking, we'll pay you 70% of it, let's say. They were going to do all of it. I said, sure. This guy came down, they put out Truck Parking Club signs. I said, look, it's only going to be for a few months. No problem. You can stop anytime you want. So these truck drivers will get on there and say they're passing through Birmingham, just like Airbnb. They would say, I need somewhere to park for the night that's got big enough for me to turn my tractor trailer around. I can sleep there, $30 a night. So like some of it was $30 a night. Weekly, it was like 100 to 150. So I probably had 10 or 12 bookings just from doing that. Maybe another, $700 or $800 total. But I'm like, hey, it was still income, And I'd never heard of this. It was like Airbnb for truck drivers.
That takes me back. My very first job out of college, I was working with a group, and they had a trucking company. They were delivering a bunch of stuff, and they said, why don't you go ride with, they called him Santa Claus because he had this big white beard in his truck. And I was like, man, I grew up in the suburbs. But this will be great. And so I got in there. We just pulled over on the side of the road and slept. And you're not supposed to do that, obviously, on an off ramp or something. But I'll never forget being with Santa Claus. So that doesn't surprise me. There's a business for everything out there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, it's been great, Adam. Thank you for sharing all this information about the commercial property. I think that's fantastic. That really opened my eyes. It was a good education for me. All right, everybody, that is it for this episode of the Evernest Real Estate Investor Podcast. We will be back next time with a new episode.